we're ranking the offhand weapons. Intro? I don't know. I've gotten on. Let's go. Coming in dead last are the Lexicons, and okay, I have mentioned several times before how Outward is generally very well balanced. These, however, they feel more like cut content I randomly managed to find in the debug menu. Now, they allow you to cast runes, and the Rune Sage is a very strong and versatile skill tree, but the thing is, you don't even have to use them if you go for the internalized Lexicon passive. And sure, paladin builds that don't fully invest into the skill tree will still find lexicons relevant to cast protection and, more importantly, feel cool, and full-on rune mages also benefit somewhat from instead going with runic prefix. But you've got access to 3 breakthrough points, and so gluing yourself to a lexicon prohibiting the use of any other offhand option as well as two-handed ones is just not the best play, I think. And yes, I am of course fully aware that using the runic Great Blade still allows for rune casting, but due to its low impact I just don't value it at all. Like, you can't have a claymore with an attack speed of 1 and the same impact of a fucking steel saber. Also, adding to my suspicion that lexicons are maligned by the devs and only made it into the game because not having them will make breakthroughless rune mages too strong is the fact that I can barely even talk about lexicons plural as there's fucking 2. Now, I get only having one upgraded one in the base game, but come on, there's been 1 post-game update and 2 DLCs. How in the Miyazaki is there at least 1 more? Could have been an endgame boss craftable, could have been an awakened artifact, could have belonged to the Rust Lich, but ultimately 5% mana reduction and build lightning and ethereal damage is all you're getting. Well, I just found out that there's an enchantment called Fechtbuch which adds 40 fucking physical damage %. No, I don't think that's as broken as it appears to be, considering that you're gonna be deciding between gear to either boost physical or elemental damage. It'd be difficult to balance both. Also, other offhand options just provide more value, I think. But still, 40% is a fucking lot. Did you know that you can sprint during Lantern Throw and that it's still fairly accurate? Pretty cool. And that's about all of the positives I can say about a weapon class primarily intended to instead serve as a light source. Well, okay, Flamethrower is actually genuinely strong in the early game, and you can of course conveniently get it right in Conflux Mountain. If used with default lanterns, it can deal 66 fire damage, about as much impact, and inflict burning, which makes it potent enough to clear all but the hardest content in the Cursanese. And I just found out that yes, it is pronounced Cursanese, which is both understandable as it's Greek, but also abominable, and I fucking hate it. Anyways, recently I looked up some up-to-date statistics pertaining to game dev salaries and was incredibly surprised to find out that Canada seems to be ahead of the pack by a significant margin, at least specific to Unity. That caught me off guard, considering that a significant hub for game development is located in Quebec, a province that mainly speaks French, and as such I had presumed the entire area to still be entrenched in tribal warfare with the goal of securing the rights to poison yourself by way of eating snails, preferably still alive and desperately trying to escape the oral orifice of the, again, presumed fake Frenchman. But as of course apparent through the data, I was mistaken, as I have gone on to find out that Quebec is indeed home to civilization. Apologies to the many Canucks I have in previous years offended with the accusation of being analogous to the French. Well, the point I was originally going to make was that the supposedly industry-leading wages in Canada explain the fact that some of bother to not only make Flamethrower change its damage type and appearance based on several base game lanterns and torches, but also to add 4 enchantments for the Virgin Lantern, allowing it to not only imitate the Coil Lantern and Axe Flame Torch, but also to deal previously unavailable decay damage as well as inflict darts. All of this is of course borderline irrelevant, as by the time you can enchant a torch, you can enchant dang well anything else and get better results, but still, it's impressive someone was paid to do this. I hope they were paid. Guillaume. Well, apparently not enough to also apply the effects to Lantern Throw, but whatever, that skill is very obviously only intended for early game anyways. Also, for Outward 2, I want to see a 3rd lantern skill that allows you to and will release methane equivalent to the output of the entire cattle industry in 2024, straight out of your speaking of things that should be added to Outward 2, please add a unique animation when sliding down a hill with a shield that has you do a sick grind on it. And I don't care if it reduces fall damage, in fact, make it so that the animation speeds you up, resulting in an even deadlier fall, but add it. I will do anything. Well, okay, no, I won't. But it would be funny, as is the shield's propensity to be a very mediocre option. And I do genuinely mean mediocre. It's okay, fine, usable, and sometimes useful, but it's barely ever optimal, as shields of course trade in offensive potential for defensive capability. However, if I'm going to be honest, every time I use a shield build, I just use it for its offensive skills. All the footage you see of me blocking is because I remembered that, well, having that footage would be kind of necessary for a shield. The reason for why they are rarely ever the optimal defensive option is really quite simple. They take too long to get up. You might say erecting them is dysfunctional, whereas the dodge roll in this game is not only fairly forgiving with its iframes, but also oftentimes allows you to dodge attacks after attacking yourself in situations in which instead blocking would have resulted in you getting hit before your slab could fully reach its zenith. Is that sexual innuendo obvious? Probably not. I'm just gonna stop with that. Also, while blocking with a shield does protect you from projectiles, when blocking with a weapon does not. Both fully prevent physical attacks, and if we're being honest, there's no single projectile fast enough to invalidate dodging anyways. And that's not to mention that many AoE blast attacks can't be blocked by shields either. Meaningfully turtling up is not possible unless you're willing to just face tank. However, I do still occasionally play with shields because paladin builds in this game have incredibly synergistic skills, which is of course very nice. Part of the aforementioned synergy are the shield skills themselves, which are actually fairly good. Gong Strike is probably the weakest just because it consumes your infusion, but Mace Infusion does make it more sustainable, so like, it's still fine. Shield Charge is genuinely very strong. Impact is of course the most important combat stat, and forward movement is incredibly important as well, especially when using Chode Maces. And lastly, Shield Infusion, about which I already extensively talked in my video ranking parries. Go check that out. I rambled about Canada, and so I inevitably also have to talk about their 11th province, the US. As of 2021, 2022, 2024, whenever the fuck, the US is incredibly close to catching up with Greenland when it comes to the overall firearm mortality rate. Come on, US, only 2 percentile points more and maybe they'll let you take over the island for free.
Never pay taxes.
Well, to achieve that, they'd have to stick to their automatic Walmart assault rifles, as Outward's firearms are of course not the optimal choice for high efficiency school kid culling. I genuinely do not know whether I should leave that in or not. Jesus fucking Christ. Well, the pistols are incredibly strong, and they offer several quite different playstyles. You can just carry one as a status option, or you can pocket 10 of them and quickfire them like a red-blooded obese Texan. Yeehaw! You could rely on their native damage type and use them alongside a melee weapon, or could cast a Sigil of Wind and turn them into miniature railguns. While the pistols are quite good based on what I said, their actual skills aren't really too strong. Frost Bullet itself is okay. The AoE is quite useful on an otherwise strictly single target weapon, but removing the cooldown every single fucking time is a pain in the ass, and all the movement inhibiting debuffs are borderline useless. Blood Bullet. Oh man. Back in my day, this shit didn't have a cooldown, and whilst arguably overpowered, yes, I don't know, I think a 30-second cooldown is way too fucking harsh, especially for what is supposed to be the strongest pistol skill. Make it 10 seconds and maybe reduce the bullet damage a little bit, and we're talking, but the way it is, it's just okay. And yes, I am completely aware that this game is never getting another balancing patch. The Thrice Wrought Helmet is still out there, it still looks incredibly cool, and it is still an utter waste of file space as it is complete fucking dog shit. And lastly, Shatter Bullet, which despite being the cheapest one to acquire is by far the best. It only requires iron scraps, has a relatively quick animation and thus allows for consistent reloading during combat, and most importantly has an impact multiplier of fucking 2.5 on a cannon pistol that results in a staggering 250 impact damage without any further buffs. And inflicts pain too, why the fuck not? So if you're looking to use guns but are struggling with quick slot management, the other two skills can be safely thrown overboard, as realistically Scatter Shot is the only one you need to make Alright top the charts and surpass even the great US of A when it comes to firearm mortality. Do I even need to elaborate any further? I mean, I probably do. So, between pistols, Chakrams, and the obvious top spot, daggers, Chakrams steal the least DPS, not in small part due to the longer cooldown on their skills. However, they have some other qualities that make them incredibly strong. Well, for one, Chakram Arc. Yep, yeah, it's fucking broken. Chakram Pierce is also very solid, and it has very interesting stagger properties, as if the return staggers or completely stuns the enemy as it came from behind, they'll be knocked towards you. Now, this may seem like a downside for a ranged weapon, but since Chakrams are never really a build's primary option, but rather complementary, it's really quite useful and typically allows you to get that one extra hit in that you'd have otherwise lost catching up to the enemy. And lastly, Chakram Dance, which requires a minuscule amount of neuron activity to properly use, but if mastered is completely fucking busted. The easiest way to get the most out of it is to first get the enemy below 50 stability, conveniently made easy by Arc, and then get relatively close to them and cast Dance. It will stagger and then stun the enemy, resulting in them of course tumbling backwards, primed to take all 5 hits straight to the schnozzle, resulting in them taking 400% weapon damage. And well, the AoE is of course also fucking ridiculous. So while Chakrams on their own won't carry a build, their immense AoE impact and burst damage helps them become a potent option. Their low mana cost makes them work with pretty much any other skill tree combination, be it an otherwise melee focused axe, heavy attack spammer, or a rune mage that doesn't need a lexicon to remember 4 fucking letters. Last video I talked about how the gauntlet weapon type reminded me of the brass knuckles often carried about by a Brexit geezer. It's similarly the common roadman found all across the urban areas of the UK is closely attached to their knife or dagger, used to shank those that aren't fully comprehensive of their silly made-up tongue.
We're gonna make a lot of peas.
P organ.
Thankfully though, the poor British imitation of the typical Slav is much less proficient with the dagger than our handsome protagonist. As unlike in the real world, which may or may not actually include the UK, daggers in Outward are the closest things to weapons of mass destruction. First of all, stealth. Unless you're in a boss fight, it's trivial to sneak up behind an unsuspecting target with the stealth training passive and to subsequently stab them in the back. It's easy. And it does a lot of damage. Would you believe me when I say that backstab is the weakest advanced dagger skill, and by a pretty wide margin? Have a maelstrom blade, puncture, or any other conceivable way to both inflict pain and confusion? Congratulations, you've just beaten the game. Opportunist Stab now has the highest damage and impact multiplier in the game of 600% each, and Serpent's Parry now not only inflicts extreme bleeding but also completely stuns enemies for 3 seconds, allowing you to very easily backstab them in the midst of combat for a combo with a grand total of 1200% dagger damage in a matter of seconds. Also, Dagger's Slash, while not insanely useful on traditional stealth builds, can, if paired with the Blood Sigil, grant you Blood Leech, allowing you to absorb 50% of an enemy's HP over 2 minutes. And again, that means that daggers are quite flexible, able to be paired with the Crimson Plate armor for purely the highest dagger damage with a hybrid Hex Mage build, or even, you won't believe this, a Rune Mage capable of remembering 4 fucking letters. Well, okay, we are done. All the weapon classes are ranked now. Very cool. If you disagree with me, you are wrong, as I am by my very nature infallible, but still let me know in the comments. I will of course continue beating a dead horse that has probably perished years ago by ranking stuff in this game, like skill trees, questlines, areas, spells, melee skills, whatever. Also, subscribe, can't forget that. Have a good one.